Were foreign countries kind of looking at all this and kind of licking their chops, saying we can have an advantage if this goes a certain way?
Napoleon III was, especially. The English were more worried about the disruption of commerce. About 80% of the cotton that was used in English mills came from the South. Over 90% of the cotton used in French mills came from the South. Cotton was king, according to a number of Southern pundits, but one thing that is often not realized is that wheat was emperor. The British Isles got most of their wheat from the north, and this was shipped through the St. Lawrence Seaway or by railroad, and then from Canada transported to the British Isles. So cotton trade being disrupted greatly worried the British, but what worried them more was the, as they call it, corn, the grain trade, because without that, then they're really in trouble. So the British did not want to antagonize the North and lose the grain trade, but at the same time, they wanted a resumption of the cotton trade. And there's a number of books that have been written on the diplomacy that both the Union and the Confederacy used to try, and the Union to keep the Europeans out, the Confederacy to try and get them in. And ultimately the Union was successful. These books are really revealing in the diplomatic maneuverings that were done and the touchy situation, but eventually the Union succeeded, kept the foreign powers out. There was really no danger that, other than France, the foreign powers wanted to conquer anything on the continent, but they wanted to end the disruption. And the British especially wanted to have a negotiated peace. The Union absolutely refused to negotiate a peace, and they succeeded in having their way.
The things that survive to this day are symbols, and we see all these images of the different flags, and I'd like you to talk a little bit about some of the flags that existed. The Bonnie Blue flag, for instance.
Okay.
What was that?
That was a flag that apparently was first used in the Republic of West Florida. You've never heard of this, because it didn't last long. This was, as the Spanish Empire broke up, this was for a while an area that is actually very close to the Mississippi and near New Orleans, that some people decided was going to be a free republic and perhaps join the United States. Eventually that went by the wayside, but they apparently used a blue flag with a white star on it at times. This became sort of a symbol right before the Civil War. If you're going to secede, you don't want to use the same flag. And this was one of the flags that was floating around, and so it was actually the first flag that flew when the Southern Convention in Montgomery, Alabama formed the Confederacy. They hadn't really constructed a flag yet, and so there was a very popular song called the Bonnie Blue Flag that was maybe the most popular song in the South during the Civil War. But this flag was not popular everywhere, so when the Confederacy formed, they commissioned a group to come up with a national flag.
Now, the national flag, we see the symbols, we see them on the back of pickup trucks these days.
That's not the national flag.
It isn't?
No, it wasn't the first national flag. The cross that you see on the back of pickup trucks, yeah, that was actually the battle flag of Northern Virginia, and it was patterned on the cross of St. Andrew, the patron saint of Scotland, which was an X. And this eventually was used by the Army of Northern Virginia on the southern side. But the first flag was what is actually called the Stars and Bars, and that's a circle of stars in a field of 3 stripes, red and white. This was not as popular as some other flags, let's put it this way. So even though it was adopted and first flown when Lincoln was inaugurated president, it was never officially adopted by the Confederate Congress. And by 1863, there was a certain amount of desire to change the flag, which they did. So the second national flag, actually the first one to be officially adopted, was called the Stainless Banner, and it was mostly white with that X with the stars in it in one corner. It didn't cover the whole flag. It was in one corner, and the rest of the flag was white. The problem with this flag is that if the breeze isn't blowing, it looks like a white flag. Surrender. So, very late in the war, March of 1865, they changed that by putting a red stripe top to bottom on the outside of the flag. And there are very few of these because the war was almost over. But that was the third national flag. The X that you see on the back of pickup trucks never was the official national flag, although it was incorporated into the second and third national flags.
There's so much to talk about, and we haven't even mentioned the name of Abraham Lincoln, and that's for another discussion. Outside of Lincoln, during this period, if you could interview somebody from that period of 1860, 1861, and say, what were you thinking? What individual would you just like to sit down and talk with?
Geez, there's so many. And one of the interesting aspects of that is that their views tended to change. A lot of people that were trying to hold the Union together in 1860 were tearing it apart in 1861. Maybe a couple of the more interesting people to talk to at the time would have been the president and vice president of the Confederacy. That would be Jefferson Davis.
And Stevens.
And Stevens, Alexander Stevens. And Alexander Stevens had given more thought to this, and so he had a more highly developed philosophy. But Jefferson Davis actually was really trying to sort of hold the Union together in 1860. So it would be very interesting to, let's say, interview him every 3 months from, let's say, the beginning of 1860 till the time he was elected, to see how his attitudes changed as history moved on.
I've got to wrap it up here, and I know that we can talk a little bit more because Stevens and Lincoln were talking to each other during that November to March period of time. Dr. Blankemeyer, thank you so much for visiting. Will you come back?
Glad to be here. Sure will.
Okay. And thank you for joining us. This has been Studio 21.